Welcome to Explore with Adam. Today we are jumping into a topic that is a huge passion of mine, Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, yeah, I love this one.
Imagine a site in Turkey with these massive, beautifully carved stone structures, almost 12,000 years old.
That's 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. It's incredible.
And here's the kicker.
What's that?
It was built by hunter-gatherers.
People who, according to conventional wisdom, shouldn't have had the know-how or the social structure for such a monumental undertaking.
Right, like finding a skyscraper in the Amazon rainforest built by an uncontacted tribe.
It just doesn't fit the narrative.
So how do we explain this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are two main narratives trying to make sense of Göbekli Tepe. One is the idea of gradual evolution from earlier cultures, with Göbekli Tepe representing the peak of a long development process.
Okay.
The other is the possibility of a transfer of technology from a lost civilization, perhaps one wiped out by a catastrophic event.
Okay. Let's start with the gradual evolution theory. Where do we even begin to trace that back?
Well, a good place to start is with the Natufians, a culture that existed in the Levant region from around 15,000 to 10,200 BC. They're considered potential precursors to the builders of Göbekli Tepe.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting about the Natufians is that they weren't just simple nomads. They had settlements, and some of their structures show surprisingly early signs of architecture using stone.
Like Ain Malaha in Israel.
Exactly. Ain Malaha dates back about 14,300 years, almost 3,000 years before Göbekli Tepe. One structure there called Shelter 51 shows evidence of geometric planning and complex design. They even used limestone blocks to create a foundation.
Wow, so they were using geometry and laying foundations thousands of years ago. That's impressive.
And it doesn't stop there. Other
Yeah.
Natufian sites like Tel Kormel in Syria have circular stone towers dating back 12,500
Oh,
years.
wow.
So you can see how the argument for gradual evolution takes shape.
Yeah.
The Natufians were using stone, they had settlements, and there's a lineage leading up to Göbekli Tepe.
So it's like they were building up their skills over time, gradually becoming more sophisticated. But how do those structures compare to Göbekli Tepe? I mean, Göbekli Tepe's scale and artistry are on another level.
That's true. Göbekli Tepe is undeniably more complex and monumental. However, the Natufians did demonstrate a clear understanding of working with stone planning structures and creating settlements.
That makes sense. It's like they had the building blocks, but something sparked a leap forward, something that helped them create Göbekli Tepe. Could that something be the cataclysmic event you mentioned earlier?
Possibly. While the Natufian connection offers a compelling case for gradual development, another theory throws a dramatic twist into the story: the Younger Dryas.
Okay.
Imagine a sudden and severe return to Ice Age conditions around 12,800 years ago.
Oh, wow.
That's the Younger Dryas, and it lasted for about 1,200 years. What's intriguing is that this period of intense climate change coincides with a dramatic acceleration of change in human societies.
It's like this sudden global cooling forced humanity to innovate and adapt to survive.
Exactly. Think about it. Agriculture emerges, complex societies develop, and monumental architecture like Göbekli Tepe appears. It's more than just a coincidence. And there's a theory, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, or YDIH, which suggests this sudden climate shift was caused by multiple fragments of a comet striking Earth.
Wait, a comet impact? That sounds like something out of a disaster movie. Is there any evidence to support that?
There is, and it takes us to a site in Syria called Abu Huraira. Abu Huraira appears to have been directly hit by one of these airbursts at the onset of the Younger Dryas. Researchers found melted glass, nanodiamonds, and other impact markers. These findings suggest an event far more powerful than the Tunguska event in 1908, which flattened a huge area of Siberian forest.
Wow, that's incredible. So if Abu Huraira was hit at the start of the Younger Dryas and Göbekli Tepe was built at the end, how does that tie into this lost civilization idea?
Well, the theory goes that a lost civilization possessing advanced knowledge was devastated by the Younger Dryas cataclysm. Some survivors sought refuge with hunter-gatherer groups sharing their knowledge and skills in the process.
So these survivors were the ones who helped the hunter-gatherers make that leap forward, inspiring them to build something like Göbekli Tepe.
Precisely. Göbekli Tepe becomes a sort of cultural time capsule built by the descendants of these survivors, carrying the echoes of a lost world.
Oh, wow.
It's fascinating stuff, Rick.
This is really interesting. So we got a lot to unpack here. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back to dive deeper into this incredible story.
So we left off last time talking about Göbekli Tepe as a potential time capsule from a lost civilization.
Yeah.
Now let's examine another intriguing aspect, the deliberate burial of this site.
Okay, why was Göbekli Tepe buried? And how does that connect to the idea of a lost civilization?
The fact that it was buried is significant in itself. It wasn't simply abandoned and left to decay. It was carefully backfilled with layers of soil and stone, effectively sealing it off from the world.
That sounds intentional.
Mm.
Almost like they were trying to protect something.
Exactly. And that's where the lost civilization theory comes in. Some researchers believe this burial was a deliberate act of preservation, a way of safeguarding the knowledge encoded at Göbekli Tepe for future generations.
So instead of just leaving it to crumble, they buried it to protect its secrets. Like a time capsule, but on a massive scale.
Precisely. What's even more intriguing is that Göbekli Tepe isn't the only site in the region that was deliberately buried. Karahan Tepe, another site with similar T-shaped pillars and megalithic structures, was also carefully backfilled.
So this wasn't just a one-off event. It seems like there's a pattern of burying these important sites. But why go through all that effort?
That's the big question, isn't it? Professor Nekmi Kurul, the lead archaeologist at Karahan Tepe, has written extensively about what he calls the phenomenon of buried buildings in the Near East and Anatolia. He suggests this practice of ritually burying structures was more widespread than we thought.
Okay, so burying these sites wasn't unique to Göbekli Tepe. It seems like a deliberate act with a deeper meaning. But what were they trying to preserve, and for whom?
Perhaps they were curating a legacy for a future they wouldn't see, a legacy maybe only partially understood by the hunter-gatherer cultures they were integrating with.
Interesting.
And this brings us to something really fascinating. Remember those astronomical carvings on Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe, the so-called vulture stone?
Yes, the ones that some researchers believe point to the date of the Younger Dryas impact, right?
Exactly. The dating system used on that pillar based on the precession of the equinoxes is incredibly sophisticated. Let me explain. Precession is like a slow wobble in the Earth's rotational axis.
Okay.
It takes about 26,000 years for the Earth to complete one wobble.
I'm following so far. But how do they even know about this wobble?
That's the mind-blowing part. To understand precession, you need meticulous observation and complex calculations. And according to conventional archaeology, this level of astronomical knowledge shouldn't have existed at that time.
Wait, are you saying they had knowledge of precession thousands of years before the ancient Greeks?
That's what some researchers are suggesting. And it's a huge deal. It implies a level of scientific understanding that we didn't think existed so far back in time.
So who were these ancient astronomers? Could they have been the survivors of that lost civilization we've been talking about?
It's a possibility, isn't it? Imagine these survivors possessing advanced knowledge of the cosmos, passing down their wisdom to the builders of Gobekli Tepe. Those builders, in turn, encode that knowledge into the very fabric of the site, including those astronomical carvings on Pillar 43.
This is incredible. So we have this deliberate burial of sites, potentially to preserve ancient knowledge and evidence of sophisticated astronomy that seemingly predates the Greeks.
Yeah.
It all points towards a lost civilization, doesn't it?
The evidence is certainly compelling and challenges our assumptions about the origins of civilization. If these survivors did exist, and if they did influence the development of cultures like the Tastapeller civilization, our history books might need a serious rewrite.
Wow, that's a radical idea. But the evidence from the buried sites to the astronomical carvings seems to support it.
It does. And it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. What if the seeds of our modern civilization were actually planted by the survivors of a lost Ice Age culture? A culture with a deep understanding of astronomy, architecture, and perhaps even agriculture.
It's mind-boggling to think that our civilization might have roots in a culture so ancient and advanced. But if Gobekli Tepe represents the end of an era, the combination of this transfer of knowledge, what came next? What happened to these hunter-gatherer cultures that had been so profoundly influenced?
Well, that's where the story takes another fascinating turn. As we move into the Neolithic period, we see these hunter-gatherer cultures now equipped with new knowledge and skills transforming into something new.
They evolved.
They did. They became settled agricultural societies. And building on the legacy of their predecessors, they started to develop their own unique expressions of culture. This included monumental architecture, elaborate rituals, and complex social structures.
So it's like this lost civilization set the stage for a whole new chapter in human history, paving the way for the rise of agriculture and complex societies.
It's a fascinating possibility, isn't it? Their knowledge and influence passed down through generations may have helped spark a cultural revolution. And from that revolution emerged the first cities, the first empires, and ultimately the foundations of our modern world.
Wow, it's incredible to think that the echoes of this lost civilization might still be reverberating through our cultures today. But so far, we've been focusing on Southwest Asia. Could this lost civilization have had a global influence?
That's a question worth exploring. Remember the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, the YDIH. It proposes that the cataclysm wasn't just a regional event, but a global one. Multiple comet fragments striking Earth would have had widespread consequences.
So we're talking about impacts and airbursts happening all over the planet.
Potentially, yes. And that raises another intriguing question. If this lost civilization was indeed global, could there be other undiscovered Göbekli Tepes out there? Other sites perhaps buried beneath the sands of time waiting to be unearthed?
Like archaeological breadcrumbs leading us back to a forgotten past, what would we even be looking for?
Those breadcrumbs might not be limited to monumental architecture. They could take many forms: unique artifacts, unusual burial practices, or even myths and legends passed down through generations. For example, flood myths are found in cultures all around the world. Could some of these be a distant memory of the Younger Dryas cataclysm?
That's a fascinating thought. So we're talking about a global search for evidence of this lost civilization, a search that could rewrite our understanding of history. Where are researchers looking?
While some researchers focus on Southwest Asia, others are looking at potential clues in the Americas, Europe, Africa, and even Antarctica.
Antarctica? Seriously?
Yes, there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that Antarctica might have been ice-free and even inhabited in the distant past. Some researchers believe that the survivors of this lost civilization might have sought refuge there, leaving behind traces of their presence.
Now that's a truly epic adventure. Imagine finding evidence of a lost civilization buried beneath the ice of Antarctica.
It would be a groundbreaking discovery, wouldn't it? It would challenge our most fundamental assumptions about the history of our planet and our species.
And it would add another layer to the mystery of Göbekli Tepe. If this site is a time capsule from a lost civilization, perhaps Antarctica holds the key to unlocking its secrets. But let's get back to something we touched on earlier. Why did they bury these sites? What was their motivation?
We've talked about preservation, about safeguarding knowledge for future generations. But some researchers believe these burials were more than just practical measures. They see them as symbolic acts, rituals imbued with deep meaning.
So not just preserving knowledge, but also transmitting a message. What kind of message?
That's the ultimate mystery, isn't it? It's possible their message is about more than just the past. It might be about the future, about who we are, where we came from, and what our place is in the grand scheme of things.
It's like these ancient builders were reaching across millennia trying to connect with us, their descendants.
In a way, yes. And perhaps by studying these sites, by deciphering their symbols and understanding their rituals, we can begin to receive that message.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey. We've gone from the mysteries of Göbekli Tepe to the global implications of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. We've explored the possibility of a lost civilization, their advanced knowledge, and their enigmatic motivations for burying their sites.
And while we may never have all the answers, the search itself is a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity. Our drive to understand our past, our origins, and our place in the universe is what makes us human.
It makes you wonder what other mysteries are waiting to be uncovered. Perhaps somewhere out there beneath the sands of a forgotten desert or locked in the ice of a polar continent lies another Gobekli Tepe, ready to challenge our assumptions and rewrite the story of humanity.
Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind. The truth, as they say, is out there,